Welcome back to another Witcher lore video by me, the Witcher George. So, we are back with another Witcher lore video, guys. I'm going to be discussing something today that is something that I think is a pretty interesting subject, and it's something that I remember having a lot of sort of difficulty with when I was sort of in my early stages of Witcher lore learning, I suppose you could say. And it's something that has always interested me because I always found Witchers, of course, as the game's called The Witcher, I found Witchers so interesting. I thought they were just such an interesting subject, and I always wondered, where actually are all the Witchers? Of course, we see a few Witchers in the games. I mean, just to name all the Witchers we actually see in the games and the books, there is Geralt, Eskel, Lambert, Vesemir, Letho, Orcs, Seret, the mysterious assassin from the Witcher 1 cinematic, Gaetan, Yod-Karadin, Ivo of Belhaven, Berengar, and Cohen, and I suppose sort of Ciri if you want to count her as an actual Witcher, like say Leo, who was not quite a Witcher, but he was pretty much there at the start of The Witcher 1. Meaning he had all the gear, the medallion, all that sort of stuff. He looked pretty much like a Witcher, but I believe he just didn't have the proper Witcher mutations. No, so other than these Witchers, we don't really see any in basically all of the games and books. And you might think, oh, that's a pretty long list, but for something as common as a Witcher, I mean, the Witchers, they have multiple schools, they exist in loads of different areas. CD Projekt Red added a lot just for the new schools they added. There aren't actually that many, really at all. There really aren't many Witchers around. And why is this? You know, they're a really powerful thing in the Witcher universe. They are incredibly skilled swordsmen. They have these incredible mutations. They are resistant to disease. They can be created. So why aren't there more of them? Why is there so few? Well, in today's Witcher lore video, I would like to discuss why there is so few Witchers, at least that we see in the games and books, and why their numbers appear to be dwindling more and more. I'll also add, for anyone wondering, that I know this video is a little bit less scripted and intense as some of my bigger videos, like the video I did recently on Kahir, but I will be getting back to those videos soon. I plan to do those once a month, and these videos are just easier to make so I can make more of them and give you guys more Witcher content. So I'm basically going to be making those bigger lore videos just as frequently, but I'm also going to be trying to do more of these videos on top of that. So now we got that out of the way, let's properly discuss the subject of today's video. So, as I said, Witchers are not that prevalent in the current Witcher universe, I suppose you could say. There's not really that many of them hanging around, there's not many of them currently on the path, taking contracts and all the rest. And why is this? Well, for the first reason, pretty much all of the Witcher keeps that we know of have been destroyed. If you look at Kaer Morhen, it's not exactly in the best shape, and at least by the end of The Witcher 3, it is pretty much abandoned. There is some information regarding how Eskel maybe remains there and might end up restarting the School of the Wolf, but at least if you go by the ending of The Witcher 3, the keep is not in a good way. There's very few Wolf School Witchers left. Lambert and Geralt certainly don't seem like they're planning to go back anytime soon. Vesemir, of course, will not be taking care of Kaer Morhen, and I will try and avoid spoilers as best I can, but I will give everybody a spoiler warning now, just in case I do let something slip. And all in all, the Wolf School keep of Kaer Morhen is not in a good state. Of course, it was attacked by peasants a long time ago, which led to why it's in such a bad state as it is, and why so many Witchers died. And that was, I suppose, the first step, and now with all these sort of changes in the world, it's just got worse and worse. You then have the Cat School Witchers, and I believe their school was located in this sort of traveling caravan, although this is something that's a little bit sort of ambiguous, and the lore sources on this are sort of varying, but regardless, The Witcher 3 does tell us that the Cat School was destroyed. We also know from the games that the Viper School was pretty much destroyed, and although Letho tried to make a deal with Emir var Emreis to remake the Viper School, and this was why he was killing the kings in The Witcher 2, obviously that kind of fell through and he became a fugitive, and he can either die or live depending on what you decide. There is then information from a lore source that is not exactly canon to the games. It's a little bit confusing. I don't think it's been confirmed as canon. It's from the Witcher tabletop RPG, so a little bit confusing, but the Griffin School Keep was said to have been destroyed in that book, and in regards to the Bear School Keep, it is said that it is not destroyed, although as you'll know from having played every single one of the games, of course the Bear School is not in the books, but there is basically no Bear School Witchers around, at least in the areas that we go to, although perhaps they're further south or something like that, but we get the impression that there are not many Witchers around full stop. I mean, we do see the Bear School Witcher Ivo of Belhaven in Thronebreaker, but of course this was quite a while before the events of even The Witcher 1. I believe something like 6 years or something like that the game would have taken place, and obviously even further back from The Witcher 3. So that's the first reason why there aren't many witches. There is not really any place for them to be trained at the moment, at least that we know of. We don't really know about what's going on with the Manticore School or the Crane School, which is a little bit of another confusing witches school. The Crane School was only mentioned once, and this is in some sort of extra material, so it's sort of canon, but it's a little bit weird. Long story short, basically there is no area for the witches to be trained at the moment, at least that we can be completely sure of. And the evidence shows us that there aren't any witches being trained, as we haven't been told anything about it. Some of the main reasons new witches are not being trained is it's thought that the sort of witcher secrets, so how they turn normal people into witches, have been pretty much just lost because all the various witcher keeps have been destroyed, and I imagine the mages that knew the secrets of how to perform the mutations would have died over time, and just all the documentation that I imagine would specify how a witcher was made is just gone at this point. So for the most part they have lost the secrets of how to make a witcher, but in The Witcher 3 they sort of retcon this as well, because Yennefer can kind of do the Trial of the Grasses, so maybe they now know how to do it, and perhaps they will start producing new witches, but I'll come into some more reasons for why they might not even bother doing that anyway, because I don't think they even want to train them, even if they had all the secrets and the schools were back at their full power. So this brings me to the main reason why there aren't many witches, and this is simply that witches are not really as needed anymore. The games kind of give you a different perspective on it, but at least in the books, there aren't really that many monsters around anymore. There are a few monsters, of course. There is the occasional monster sort of hanging around, but for the most part, they're not really that big of a menace anymore. I mean, how often do you see a monster just in Novigrad? You know, like a forktail or a basilisk or something. It's not really that often. You see them in the countryside occasionally and stuff, but for the most part, you don't really see that many monsters. And at least in the books, I don't think they're as big of a threat as they maybe are in the games. And that's just from the nature of The Witcher being a game. You know, I don't think you'd have packs of drowners literally on every beach. You just would have them every so often and they'd be hiding and stuff. But for the most part, there just aren't really that many monsters, so therefore you don't really need witches. That's why there's all this talk of witches not being as useful anymore. What work are they going to do when all the monsters are gone? All that sort of stuff, because the witcher profession has just become less and less useful. And this is for loads of reasons. Obviously, the monsters are sort of starting to go extinct. I mean, it's a shame, but it is starting to happen. I mean, in the books with sorcerers like Dorigare talking about how monsters are slowly going extinct and how there are more and more getting extinct as the years go by. But on top of the monster going extinct reason, there is also just more competition. There are more groups forming that deal with the monsters. You see them a bit in the books. An example I would say that is the key example would be during the Golden Dragon story. You see multiple different groups of people that have sort of formed organizations to take down monsters and get rewards for it. Even in the games, you see the occasional group of mercenaries that have already taken down a monster and they're trying to deal with the contracts. You have bigger armies now. You have the Nilfgaardian forces that can probably deal with monsters pretty well, at least I'd say for the most part. Same with all the Northern Realms armies. You basically just have a lot of other ways to deal with the monsters, so as the monsters are going extinct and the competition is, I'd say, if anything, increasing, the witches are just becoming less and less useful. It's sort of like that thing of people always say, how did a bunch of peasants destroy the Wolf School Keep? And it's that if you just have a lot of people, you can accomplish a lot of stuff. If you just have a bunch of peasants throwing themselves at a keep, I think there was also some mages present and some other stuff, but if you just had an army of thousands and thousands, then you're probably gonna win most of the time. You know, a single witcher, an incredibly skilled swordsman, taking on 1,000 people, still gonna lose. So if you just have these massive groups of people that can easily recruit new people, because there isn't this sort of genetic requirement to basically be a witcher, obviously if you discount Ciri, they can just get more and more people. The witchers can't really recruit anyone anymore. They've lost all their keeps. At least they seemingly, before the whole Yennefer thing with the Trial of Grasses, have lost the secrets of how to make their mutations. So they basically just are not as useful anymore. And obviously, as there's witches currently out in the world, it's always said witches never die in their beds, so they're dying just from their line of work. No new ones are being made, so it's just slowly getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And one day there will probably be no witches at all, unless there is some sort of revival or they're really needed. Maybe another conjunction could happen and loads of monsters will just appear. That would definitely be something that would lead to more witches. Or maybe Eskel might get the help of Yennefer and start trying to produce more witches. You never know what might happen, but at the moment, that is pretty much why there is no witches, for the reasons I've explained today. I suppose the current living witches also don't really want to make new witches, as they know how painful it is to become a witcher and they don't really want to inflict that upon other people. I know that Lambert in particular of the School of the Wolf was opposed to this, as you might remember from actually playing The Witcher 3, and all the other Witchers, par maybe Vesemir, at least out of the School of the Wolf, did not seem entirely up for making new Witchers, at least in the ways that they used to. Although I could see someone like Eskel and maybe Geralt being swayed towards it, but definitely not someone like Lambert. But anyway guys, that's the end of today's Witcher lore video, another quick fun short one. I hope you've all enjoyed, this has been quite fun to discuss. I hope this has helped any of you out, just wondering, you know, where are all the Witchers, what's happening, why is there so few of them in the games, why is there, I guess, so few of them in the books as well, I suppose even less. And although it is talked about a bit in the games and you get the general sense, I hope this video has just given you a bit more information on why there are basically no Witchers left. I mean, I'll just add another reason. I talked about Witchers never dying in their beds, but if you think about it, a lot of the Witchers we've met in the games have died or have an option to die, which is kind of crazy. I mean, you have Lethu, who has an option to die. You have Yod-Karadin, who has an option to die. Lambert talks about that Witcher called Aiden, who dies. You have, I'm just going to give you some quick spoilers for The Witcher 3, quick warning. You have Vesemir, who dies. You have Orcs, who dies. You have Seret, who dies. You have the mysterious assassin from The Witcher 1, who dies. You have Cohen, who died in the books. You have Leo, who died at the start of The Witcher 1. And you have Berengar, who dies at the end of The Witcher 1. Gaetan even has an option to die in his quest. Thinking about it, even Lambert can die in the Battle of Kaer Morhen, so there is just a lot of witches that can die. There's also the option for Geralt and Ciri dying, but I think those two deaths are a little bit more ambiguous, because as I've said, Ciri could have easily just decided not to go back to Geralt. At the end of The Witcher 3, if you get the bad ending and Geralt dies, it's sort of canon that he didn't die if you then go on to do Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine, because obviously your Geralt then, with his decisions, carries on and does stuff, so those two I think are a little bit different. I mean, there is a lot of witches that die. There's getting less and less and less as these games go on, but we'll have to see how it goes. Maybe there'll be a resurgence, who knows. But anyway, that's it for today's video, guys. Just wanted to add in that final point there. Be sure to like it to let me know you enjoyed it and want more Witcher videos. Be sure to subscribe as I make Witcher videos. I'm not even sure if it's every week at this point, guys. I think I'm going to be trying to make a lot more, so I make Witcher videos just in general, probably more than once a week at this point, so be sure to check out that. Moving on to Blood and Wine soon. Don't want to date this video, but it's going to be happening soon in regards to the channel, so check that out. That's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, that's it for today's video, guys. Thank you all for watching so much. Really do appreciate all the support. Leave a comment down below telling me what you thought of today's video, if there's anything else you want me to do, any ideas you have for me to cover in these shorter lore videos, and I will see you all in the next video. Have an awesome rest of the week.